Recording. All right, so we are continuing with our SQLAlchemy meets Flask. So we had done, I think, lab 16 started SQLAlchemy, and we did lab 16 was sort of a single table, and 17 was sort of two tables with a one-to-many relationship. Then by 18, we had brought in many-to-many relationships, and that requires a sort of a separate table. And then with 19, we brought in Flask. So we were having the user making an interface for the user to interact with the database. And in this case, insert something, and we made our life simple from the beginning and chose to insert into the table that had no foreign keys. And so then we are ready now to insert into the tables that do have a foreign key, and I spelled foreign wrong. Okay. But first thing is I have sort of a little in-class ER modeling, again, to show you what I want in terms of you writing out relationships. So we'll look at this little in-class ER modeling, then I'll show you this, some code for inserting a table that has a foreign key, and then there'll be time for you to work as normal. Okay. And for this, you just have to sort of write out the relationships, but I may, on the test, on test 3, which will be in the finals week, give you something where I'm describing a scenario, and then you have to actually write the SQL code to sort of design the classes. All right, so here is our scenario. Santa wants a database. There are children who have certain information, names, addresses, birth dates, and whether they're naughty or nice. So that is details information about children. So there will be some a child entity in this database. Santa follows the toy market. So he keeps data on toys, the name of the toy, the description, the age level, and the manufacturer. So there's a toy manufacturer, there's a toy, there's a child, and then there's a relationship between children and toys. There might be two relationships, depending on how we do it, talk about it, that a child wants a toy, and then a child might receive a toy. So we have to sort of write out our relationships, figure out our entities, write out the properties, pick out some primary keys, talk about the relationships. I like them expressed in these two directions. You know, a child wants many toys. A toy is wanted by many children. So I like you to express relationships that way. So let's get started with this. Okay, so let me make a blank document, and maybe I'll do my little snipping game here. And we will have, let me write in black, we will have a child entity, and there'll be some child ID. and name, child address. So those are some of the properties we had of a child, whether the child is nice or not. Okay. So that, and we'll represent it by some rectangle. That's sort of a standard. And the primary key here is the child ID. So you could say here that's, I put PK for primary key, or an asterisk, or some indication, or underline it, you know, some indication of the role it's playing here as a primary key. And what other entities? We definitely had a toy. And then I think we had a toy manufacturer. So here's a toy. And a manufacturer. And the toy will have a toy ID and a toy name. And the toy description and an age range. And then there's a manufacturer, which will have a manufacturer ID and manufacturer name and address or contact, some of the normal information. And this will be a primary key, of course, and just go overboard. And this will be the primary key for a toy. Okay. And then we'll start talking about the relationships. And we've got to decide if these are just entities, then in our ER diagram, we don't need to show the bridge tables. But if we want to say these are tables, then I'm flexible that way. So if you want in this picture to say these are the tables, then fine. And if you tell me you want it to just be the entities, and then we might need additional tables to be the bridge tables for many-to-many relationships, I'll say fine. So I'm not very strict on how I do my ER modeling. I'm more strict on you stating the relationships that I find more important, more problematic for students. So more important for me that you do it in a way I can see whether you get it or not. So, well, let's talk about the relationship. That is just a blank document. Here is the description. So we saw that there was, Santa is just the user of the database. Santa is not an entity in the database. We have toys. He keeps track of children. So we had information about children. We had toy market stuff. We know the toy manufacturers and we know the toys. And then we need to now talk. So those are the main entities. Now we need to talk about the relationships. So there's a relationship of a child to a toy. And we can make that either two relationships or add fields within the relationship. So I think, what did I do? I opened it and didn't click, then I could edit it or something silly. Okay, so I can say down here that let's do the simple relationship first. There's a toy and a manufacturer. And if we say something vague like doll as our toy, then there will be, so it depends what we mean by toy a little bit. So if we mean something vague like doll, then like many manufacturers or a manufacturer can make many toys, and a toy like a doll can be made by many manufacturers. But if by toy we mean something more specific, of like a Barbie doll, then that's made by one manufacturer. So we have to, this little paragraph is a little vague, and we have to read into it of what it is that we're storing in our database. What do we mean by a record in our database? Do we mean something vague like doll, or do we mean something more specific like a Barbie, which is a specific doll made by a specific manufacturer, because that affects the relationship. So, and if I write something that's vague and give it to you an assignment, then you can sort of say, this is how I'm interpreting it. So I will give you based on your interpretation. Sometimes I'll say, sometimes I'll give you strong indication in the paragraph that the toy is a specific doll made by one manufacturer. And sometimes I won't. In this case, I didn't. Other times, maybe I will. I'll try to be a little bit more careful if I give it to you on a test, so everybody's doing the same thing. But I may not. And so things are always open a little bit to interpretation. So just if you're interpreting, then tell me how you're interpreting it. So then I know that you've got the right thought process. Just in case your thought process is different than mine, then it might not be wrong. It's just maybe we're interpreting it differently. And so I want to give you points for the right thought process. So, but you got to let me know what you're thinking. Okay. So I'm going to say in this case that by toy, I mean something more specific like Barbie, and then that's made by one manufacturer. So I'm going to say a toy is made by one manufacturer. A manufacturer makes many toys. So that's the same. The two entities are toy and manufacturer. I'm saying the relationship in both directions. In each case, I'm starting with the word a, and then I come over and decide between one and many. And so since I defined the toy to be a specific kind of doll rather than the more generic doll, then the toy is made by one manufacturer, and the manufacturer makes many toys. And therefore, that's a one-to-many relationship. And that is realized in a database by having a foreign key. And the foreign key is in the toy. And so then the manufacturer ID goes in the toy table to establish that relationship. So that will be here. That will be manufacturer ID. That will be a foreign key. And that will connect up to the manufacturer. Okay. What other relationship do we have? So we know that children want toys and children may receive toys. And so next we have to decide, do we want that relationship between children and toys to be sort of two relationships? That's possible. We can have a want relationship and a receive relationship, or we can have one more complicated relationship where we say, here's a relationship between a child and a toy, and it can be that they want it but didn't receive it. So that sort of true false of want it and received it can be fields within the relationship. So I need some input from at least one of you. Do you want to make it two relationships? Do you want to make it one relationship with some fields? How do you think you want to do this? Anybody have any feeling for what they want to do? No. All right. Thanks a lot. Okay, so I'll make it two relationships. Why not? So it's too many to many relationships. So a child wants, so this is the want relationship. And then I'll have another receives, a separate receives relationship, but a child wants many toys. At least some children want many toys. And a toy is wanted or is desired, is wanted by many children. So that makes that want relationship a many-to-many relationship. And then I'm going to make a separate relationship of receive. So a child receives many toys. A toy is received by many children. So that's, if it were one relationship or two relationships, as I've made it here, either way, it's a many-to-many relationship. I have it as too many-to-many relationships. It can be written as one many-to-many relationship, but either way, it's many-to-many. Okay, so now that's the expression of the relationship in this example. Now I'm going back over to my diagram. And the question I have is, I can write the relationship just as, make the relationships just lines, and I would be happy with that. Or I can, since these are many-to-many relationships, they're going to involve additional tables. So I can show in my picture these other tables. One more time, I'll ask if anybody has some input of, do they want to explicitly, do they want to see these other tables in the picture, or would they rather just lines to express the relationship? Say again? You want the table in the picture? Okay. So he wants the table in the picture, which is all right by me. Again, I'm not very strict on how I draw my ER diagrams. But so now there's a child-toy relationship, and we know because it's many-to-many that there will be a table in between. So when it really comes to a table, so I'm going to call this the want table, and then maybe I'll have another need table. And then that is a relationship between child and toy. It's realizing the relationship between child and toy. And so there'll be a child ID and a toy ID. And these are both foreign keys. That's sort of standard for bridge tables. And so I'll call this the want bridge. That's an I, this is an R. Okay, and we'll draw that is, here's a relationship between toy and child. And again, for me, that could have been just a straight line, but the straight line in the real database has to be this bridge table. But I'm also happy in the picture to have it explicitly drawn as a table. And then there was the receive bridge. And it's got the relationship is different. You might get something you didn't want. You might want something you didn't get. But that has the same sort of format of child ID and toy ID. And those are both foreign keys. And some people will put primary keys in their bridge tables. That's a matter of taste. You can, but you don't have to. And again, it depends on who you're trying to please. I'm flexible on that. The thing I'm not flexible on, I keep telling you, is this. I'm not flexible on this. Give me what I want on that. The picture, I say I want a picture. You give me a picture, I'm happy. So the child ID connects back here to the child and the toy to the toy. And I could have made it one bridge with more fields, like received, true or false, wanted, true or false, or something like that. So I could have done it. I could have made these two bridge tables, one bridge table with more fields. So there's an ER diagram. I'm flexible on the ER diagrams and the expression of the relationships. I'm not flexible on the expression of the relationships. This is, again, I put up that there's a project due for like the last week of class, and you will have to come up with your own database. So sort of start thinking about it. You'll have to make a picture like this. It can be like this, just screen captured. There are products that make them. If you've used those products in other classes, you don't have to learn a product from me, but if you've used a product in another class, then that's fine. So you can make it, terribly like me with the snipping tool. You could write it on a piece of paper and scan it. However you want to do this, I'm pretty flexible on the ER diagram. But there must be entities with some properties with the primary key indicated, the foreign key indicated. I'm not completely flexible, but if you've got something vaguely representing an ER diagram, you'll get those points. Any questions? Okay, let's go back over to code. But again, more people on the project lose points on the database than on the code. People will lose points in both places, but a lot of people will just say, I had database when I was a freshman and I know it, and they don't know it as well as they think they do. Okay. So now back over to code. So the new topic for the day in terms of code is making a form so the user can enter some information to be inserted into a table in a database. And this particular table is one that has a foreign key. So we're going back to painter's painting, and it is the painting that has a painter ID as a foreign key in the table. So we will be inserting paintings. Tuesday, we inserted painters. Today, we will insert paintings. All right, here we go. I downloaded it twice, open it, extract it. Extract it, there it is. Copy. I'm going over to documents 341. SQL2 is where I'm working, the VE and V, and then paste. Okay, open up code. Open up code to the folder that I just pasted things in. So I think I'm already there, but I'm going to open it again, just to make sure. Open the folder. 341, SQL2, VE, and V. That's where I pasted the stuff. That's what I want open. What's changed? I've added a painting form. I've added a painting form handler. I've added a route for the painting. I've added a form that tells me what fields I'm going to be entering into the painting table. I also changed, what did I also change? I edited the layout because now I have 2 pages. I have 2 routes, and I added some navigation. And I think I did the style a little bit, but okay. Now let's run it. Now I will tell you that on one computer, I've sometimes needed my virtual environment activated, and other times I haven't needed it. So there's some inconsistency when I install. So I'm going to activate just to be on the safe side. And it didn't like that. Oh, it's scripts activate. What am I saying? The activate is in the scripts folder. There we go. Okay. So again, I think I can get away without doing that, but it's not clear to me. Sometimes I have it set up and I need it, and sometimes I have it set up and I don't need it. But if you have it on, you're usually safer. Okay. And if you want to pip install anything, then your virtual environment should definitely be activated. Okay. So let me run it and then we'll talk about it. So I'm going to the app art routes, and then I'm going to Flask run and control click. And here it is. So here's what it's coming up first to the insert artist form. This is what we played with on Tuesday. Now that's the, oh, it says add artist and add painter. We should say painting. Okay, so that is in my layout, simple layout. This should say not add painter, but add painting. Can I refresh or do I have to? No, I think I probably have to stop it and start it. Okay, now it says add painting. Okay, so I added a little navigation that was in the layout. I have the add the painter. That's the same as it was before. I'm going to add the painting. So now I'm over on an insert painting form. I have a place for the title of the painting, a place for the default, a place, and here's where it comes in that it is a table with a foreign key. The painter ID, the painting has a foreign key of the painter. And so I have a drop-down select here. I've added some more painters because I had my add painter field. So I've added some painters along the way in testing that first page. And so I have a choice of various artists, and then that's how I'm going to make sure that the foreign key, this is an important thing in databases, that whatever I put in the painter ID, the foreign key, has to be something that matches something from the painter table. So that's what we have. Okay, so let's see how we achieve that. Well, first, let me say Control-Shift-P, and it's near the top for me, but let's say I was going to SQLite and open a database. And remember that that is an extension, a SQLite extension by Alex CVZZ that I have installed. Then, so I installed the SQLite extension, then I'm Control-Shift-P, and I search for SQLite, but I've searched for it lately, so it's up on the top for me, but I can pretend to search for it, and then I'm going to use this to open a database. What database? My art database. I'm going to expand my art database. There are paintings. I'm going to show you the table. And there are, at this stage, 24 paintings. Horse, still life, a painting of poop, apparently, and by artist number 10, whoever that is, and still life with a skull. Okay, so let's add. So I'm going to close that. Let me add a painting. So who do you want to add a painting by? You're not good at helping me today. I'll add a painting by Sargent. And he did mostly portraits. So portrait of a young lady, why not? And we'll say it is, I don't know, Lucy.jpg, and it's by John Singer Sargent. And I'm going to insert the painting. Now I have to go back and show you the code that makes all this work, but let's insert the painting. And this is just echoing out. My handler just echoes out the information, but let's go back to the database, paintings, show the table. There are now 25 paintings, and the last one is Portrait of a Young Lady. So we've gotten that information into our painting table. And that was artist 10. I guess so. John Singer Sargent also painted poop. Okay, because he seems to be artist number 10. Okay, so good, it worked. Now, how do we do it? Okay, let's check show table. Let's check this other thing. And artist number 10 was indeed John Singer Sargent. Okay. All right, so code, let's look at code. I'm gonna close my SQL Explorer to make a little bit more room. Let me start with the forms. I had the artist form, we already looked at that. But I've added the painting form. It has a place for you to enter the title, which is a string field with a label of title. It's got a validator that says you must have it. And it must be more than 2 and less than 60. And it has a default of untitled. So that's why it popped up. It said untitled. And then we could change it because there was a default. There is a name. This is the name of the file. And so the label is file name. It is required. It has a length of 2 and 60. I should probably make this minimum longer because it's got to be something .jpeg or GIF or PNG or what have you. So it probably has to be longer than 2. But anyway, I'm just stealing from other things I've done previously. And the default was default.jpg. The painter ID, I'm saying, is a select field. That's a drop down. And the label is painter ID. And you'll see here, I don't have the choices. The choices for the painter ID come from the database. So I'm going to get them later. So they're not here. Choices are going to come later. And then the submit. So this is the unusual one. This is the foreign key. I'm making a select field, which you've made before, but every time we had a select field before, either I had hard-coded choices or maybe I read a JSON file. But here I'm doing neither of those. I'm going to get them from the database. So I'm going to make some query of the database. I'm going to find out who my artists are. I'm going to shove them into this select. Okay. What's next? The routes. Here's the artist form. Here is just some code that gets run, that's not part of an app. And then here is, or it's not part of a route. And here is the other route. So I'm running, there may be a better location for this, but this will do for today at least. I'm going to the database. Remember, because the database was defined in a different file, and then I import it my DB means I'm going out to my database. It has a painter class, and I'm querying the painter class. I'm getting all of them. I'm going to create the artist choices, and I'm doing my sort of crazy tuple stuff. I make a list. I get the item name. The item is an artist. I don't know why I called it item, but it's just the item. I'm looping through the items, or you could say records, or because I'm getting things out of a database, I could call it record. I called it item. I could call it artist. I could call it poop. Doesn't matter what I call it. This is just a dummy iteration name. But it had an ID. Remember that when we're making our choices, our tuples for our choices, there are two things. There's what the user sees and what we use behind the scenes. What we want to use behind the scenes is the ID. What we want to use, what we want the user to see is a combination of the last name and the first name. So here we're going to do a last name, comma, first name. And so we're putting in the last name of the artist, the first name of the artist, and we're putting a comma and a space in between. We're creating, we're making a tuple. So I'm making a list that has the ID and then the artist's last name and first name. And then I am converting that from a list to a tuple. I can append to a list, but what I want for my choices is a tuple. So I convert it to a tuple. Then I add my tuple to my list of artists. So it's a little bit back and forth between lists and tuples, but we've seen that before when we were reading JSON files and creating choices from that. But this went to the database and created a list of artists. Now I have this located in a place where it runs once. So if I add an artist and then go over to the painting form, I might not see that brand new artist. It might make more sense for me to put that code in a function or a method that I can call, and then call it here when I call painting form. So maybe I'll do better the next time. This will get us through the day, but here I am going to the database, getting the artist, creating the choices for my foreign key. Here is my page, or here's my route for that. I go to the painting form, and here is me saying, the form had a field called painter ID for which I need choices, and they're the artist choices I just set up. That is us populating the drop-down select, showing the artist names, and behind the scenes having the artist IDs. And that's what we needed for it to be a proper foreign key. We needed the choices to come from the database, from the painter table, and to have the IDs, what we put over in the other table. So that had to be the first part of the tuple was an ID. The second part, this is what you work with behind the scenes, an ID. This is what you have the user see, last names and first names. I was printing out whether it was valid or not. Then if it was valid, I was getting my information from the form. I had a title. I had a file name. I inserted a painting record. I added the foreign key to be the painting ID. I added the painting. I committed. I moved over to the handler. That's the hard part. Now we had to have a painting form. That's sort of standard stuff. A place for the title, a place for the file name, a place for the painter ID, but they'll see painters, but what you're really passing is an ID and a button to submit. And here's some stuff at the bottom for if there are any errors, and I didn't see any errors, so you didn't even know that was there. The handler is just showing you the title, showing you the file, showing you the painter ID. And I showed you the simple layout. I went way back to like the second or third time we played with Flask, and I pulled out this navigation. Remember, we put the navigation into the common layout, and all I needed here was my routes, \artist_form and \painting_form. Those were the names of my routes. And so let me show you something about routes that I'm always a little unclear on. Especially when I redirect, I'm never sure, and this is my fault for not being sure, but I'm never sure if this should be the route or the function name. So I usually make the route and the function name the same, so I don't have to know. But if you seem to have everything right, but it won't even start, the redirecting is failing, then maybe you have these two things having a different name and you're sending it to the wrong thing. I screwed myself over and spent an hour trying to find it once time. Instead of learning the answer, I just learned to always name them the same thing. That was my solution to make that problem never happen again. All right, I think I showed you everything new. What do you have to do? The same thing, only different. So what are you doing? So you're going to make a database with two tables. I have painters and paintings. You're going to have poets and poems. If you don't like poetry, then maybe you'll use song lyrics. We're using a one-to-many relationship here. So it will be not like the Beatles. For me, when we talked about the Beatles writing songs, the Beatles wrote songs as teams. Most of them are credited to Lennon and McCartney. So we're talking here, if you're going to use song lyrics, make sure it has like one writer of a song. Okay. So a poet writes many poems, or it could be a songwriter writes many songs, but a poem is written by one poet. That's our assumption. So just make sure that's true for your data. Have a few records, at least two poets, at least three poems, and then you're going to make it so that they can add we're doing the foreign key one. So I want them to be able to add a poem. So there should be a page. If you want to do where they add a poet, that's fine, but you don't have to. What I'm interested in this case is for them to be able to add a poem. There should be a drop-down select where they choose the poet. So they can only choose a poet that's already in the database and to set up this table. So that's what you have to do. Just pretty much change the data of what I've done. Any questions? All right, I'll stop recording and answer individual questions.